Now, remember that the language standardization policy was intended to promote equity, redress, efficiency, and quality in the teaching and learning of the languages. But unfortunately, as I said it, then we were overtaken by events. I would say with the home languages, a big yes. But with the first additional, particularly with the issue of the language of learning and teaching, we really have not an elephant in the room. I'll leave that to you to decide in STEM language what you will call it. Now, language issues, continuing with that, the NDP recommendation is that the learner's home language, as LOLT, should be, kept for longer. It should be used for longer. As you well know, up to this stage, we only have, in the foundation phase, the situation in which mother tongue is used as a language of learning and teaching. Okay? Now, the marching orders here are for a possibility of, us stretching mother tongue as medium of instruction, language of learning and teaching, slightly beyond what we do. And perhaps we should share with the colleagues that there's a pilot in the Eastern Cape, right, Mandy? There's a pilot in the Eastern Cape where the Eastern Cape province is using isiXhosa in a school beyond grades 3 and 4. And we just monitor the situation. Unfortunately, we don't have any immediate report on how that is going. But this is just an attempt at seeing how far these can be addressed. And now, the National Curriculum Statement, as we said it also speaks to learners learning through their language. But now, unfortunately, we haven't been able to stretch it just beyond the foundation phase, which is the shortcoming, I think, as I said it, that we say this and then we go halfway, and midway we just sort of stand back and say, let's see what will happen. Right, and this is what the NDP proposes. A policy that every South African should study one of the 9 official black languages at schools. I'm sure colleagues are aware of a strategy called IO, Incremental Implementation of African Languages. This is a strategy that seeks to introduce African languages in those schools that were not offering African languages. Tell you what, remember that the issue of multilingualism is central in this case. The program director spoke to you, and our colleague over there has an isiZulu name. Linda, I think you also had a Sesotho name as well when you were still at Vista. So what we're looking for is at least learners being able to communicate in just not only in Afrikaans and English, but in at least an additional language. And this is a strategy, as I said it, IO, that has been piloted in the last 3 years and is due for implementation, I think, in 2018. Okay, and the intention thereof is to make sure that at least every learner, starting in 2018, every learner is able to take at least an African language. Pause. African language, let's be specific there. Remember that Afrikaans is an African language. Now, IO sort of puts Afrikaans a bit with, it clubs Afrikaans with English, because those were the languages that were developed in the past. Okay? So whether you chose it or not, inadvertently you will find yourself in an Afrikaans situation where you're learning Afrikaans. So it had some status that all the other African languages didn't have. So as a result, the focus is now on 9 other African languages, excluding Afrikaans. Right? So that's where the focus is. And now the problem begins. The NDP itself acknowledges the role of English as a global language. And of course, we're not going to pretend we don't know that. Otherwise, it would just be a Tower Bible. I mean, we wouldn't be understanding each other right now. Okay? And that one of the things, again, is the general language of learning and teaching. It's the general language of learning and teaching, of commerce, and of administration. I mean, just recently, we had the Constitutional Court as well declaring that, remember? Chief Justice Mohoe just coming to the fore and stating, yes, this will be the language of the courts. We may have translations and interpretations, but this is the language of the courts. Now, shall I pause for a minute and just allow me to instruct you to close your eyes? Just a slide back, we said language standardization, right? And then the purpose for language standardization was everybody is equal. Everybody referring to languages. But now all of a sudden we're saying, you know, this is the language from which we're going to start. And then everybody else will take an offshoot. And I have to say, colleagues, in many instances, this is why we found the DBE came under intense criticism from the society. Because in some instances where there are projects, a document would be written in English and then it would be translated. But having learned of that shortcoming, we then introduced something we call translation and converting. No, converting is not the word. I'll give you the word we use. Versioning. Yeah, versioning, translating and versioning. Okay, versioning as in this is the concept. We agree as all the home languages that we're going to study an elephant. But what we're not going to do is say, translate the elephant from the perspective of the English document. We agree on the thoughts, we develop the thoughts, and then we each go our independent route. In other words, you don't end up with a translated definition of an elephant when actually you have that definition in any African language. Okay, so those are some of the issues that already are popping up, as you can see, colleagues. The unintended consequence, if you look at all that we have said, English is still the preferred language. I have to say there are quite a number of interesting arguments, and all of us in here are involved, and we know how strongly colleagues feel about the importance of mother tongue education up to and including and going beyond tertiary education. But allow me again to use my word in this case. Most of the time we're hypocrites. I didn't say that. You know why? Because we will then say to the community, your children must learn in their mother tongue, when our children are not learning in their mother tongue. So you see, we're sending mixed messages. I had this colleague at one stage who was responsible for Sesotho languages, and he was very proud that his children could not speak Sesotho well. Now the thing is, if you're a proponent of Sesotho and you're saying everybody must, embrace Sesotho as a language, and then you turn around and say, my children cannot, and you say they're with a smile. You know what I'm saying? I'm sure you can understand why referring to us as hypocrites. Now we say this when we have platforms like this, and then we do the opposite, immediately when we leave that. Afrikaans, of course, got to be another load, and obviously the two languages, unfortunately, are not the home languages of the learners. So right there, we have an issue, which for me is not an issue anymore. That's a discussion for another day. Now, studies within and external to the DBE have actually proved that LOLD is at the moment a barrier and not a carrier, right? It's intended, LOLD, that's a language of learning and teaching, is supposed to carry the knowledge. Remember, the language and the science. Now, the language is supposed to speak, is supposed to help the learner to decode the science, but all the reports are proving different. And some of the reasons that are cited, and I'll just share with you some of the reports that we got from the maths. It's mainly maths that are cited here. They mainly speak into language. Causes, possible causes thereof for this lack of proficiency, or this not being the barrier. One, there could be an issue of proficiency on the part of both the learners and the educators. Proficiency, no, there's just no proficiency right there. We will get to this a bit later. And that language is a barrier to teaching and learning because it's not their home language, right? It is a lot, but it is not their home language. And I think my reference to the situation with FAL as well, maybe I should just share with you one case here that proves the disharmony I'm talking about. In EFAL, we say learners must write an essay, but we expect them to write an essay of 250 words. Whereas when they go to geography, they're required to write an essay of a minimum of 500 words. I'm sure you do realize that there isn't any harmony right there. You know, there's a huge gap. I mean, the jump between 250 to 500 is so enormous. It's huge. And it immediately creates, you know, that compartmentalization. In other words, the essay in English doesn't have anything to do with the essay in geography. So you can just imagine that rather than our providing the concept essay to learners right from the beginning, where learners know what an essay is and it cuts across the curriculum, then we have a situation of essay in English, 250 words, which means maybe it's not an essay. Now, actually, which of the two is an essay? Is it the geography one, or is it the IFA one? And then you become surprised when these learners arrive at the university and they can't write. I didn't hear anybody taking my CV, please. I think these are the issues, colleagues, that unfortunately we're sitting with, and that need attention. Now, the lack of proficiency, as we said it, for both interpersonal and cognitive academic skills, you know, that also has a bearing on learners, you know, being able to decode and access the science in the subject. And then we said learners are struggling with the demands of higher order language questions and language skills rather. You know, the reading and viewing that is required by the assessment task. As I'll be sharing this with you, you realize that most of the reports indicate learners are not able to understand the question. Now, if you don't understand the question, how on earth will you respond? Now, it's one thing to lack the proficiency to express yourself. And that, compounded by your inability to understand what is required of you, I'm sure you understand why we're not faring too well as a system, right? And then most learners are not coping with comprehension. They're not using appropriate vocabulary, and they're not using correct language structures and conventions when writing examination papers. Now, one would ask, is it just the languages teacher who is responsible for this? Can't be. Because remember, if we don't point them out to some of those concepts ourselves, and we don't make them realize, you know, Dr. Scow recently simplified, you know, this whole matter for me. He says conceptual development. Now, conceptual development means the learner being able to look at this structure, look at the topic, and being able to develop a concept and understand a concept. And you see, in my world, that's not informed by anything, not scientific. I believe for me to understand a topic, to understand a module, I must first be able to say, this is what it means. As you lecturers give me examples, I provide my own example that will make me understand that. I build my own concept. And for you to build that concept, you need the language. So if we just go on and tell them that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, and we expect them to understand that, I think we lose them even before we start.